Alexander Thornton stood in his penthouse office reviewing quarterly reports when a sound pierced through his concentration, the heartbroken sobbing of a small child. At 39, he'd built a financial consulting empire worth hundreds of millions. But nothing in his business experience had prepared him for the raw grief in that cry. He stepped out of his office into the main living area of his penthouse and found his housekeeper, Elena, kneeling beside a little girl who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The child clutched the broken pieces of what appeared to be a wooden toy horse, crying as if her world had ended. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thornton," Elena said quickly, her face flushed with embarrassment. "My regular sitter called in sick. I had no choice but to bring Sophie today. I told her to stay quiet in the kitchen, but she wandered in here and accidentally knocked her toy off the table. Please, I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." Alexander barely heard Elena's apology. He was focused on the little girl, who looked up at him with tear-filled blue eyes and said, "I'm sorry I broke Mr. Horse. Mommy gave him to me before she had to work all the time. Now, he's broken, and she'll be sad." Something in Alexander's chest cracked at the simple tragedy in those words. He knelt down beside the child, ignoring his expensive suit, touching the floor. "May I see Mr. Horse?" he asked gently. Sophie hesitantly handed him the broken pieces. The toy was handmade, clearly carved with love but limited skill. One leg had snapped off, and the tail was cracked. "Your mommy made this for you?" Sophie nodded. "Before she had to work 2 jobs. She used to make me toys, but now she's too tired. She says when we save enough money, she'll make me things again." Alexander looked at Elena, who was fighting back tears. He knew she was a widow, raising Sophie alone, working as his housekeeper 6 days a week. But he'd never really thought about what that meant: the exhaustion, the sacrifice, the small tragedies, like broken toys, that loomed enormous in a child's world. "Sophie, Mr. Horse isn't dead," Alexander said seriously. "He's just injured, and I think I know someone who can help him. Would you trust me to take him to a doctor?" Sophie's eyes widened. "Toy horses have doctors? The very best ones. But I need you to be patient. It might take a few days. Can you do that?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "Will it hurt him?" "Not at all. He'll come back even stronger than before." After Elena took Sophie back to the kitchen, Alexander did something he'd never done before. He canceled his afternoon meetings, called his assistant to research the city's best toy restoration specialists and woodworkers, and spent 3 hours personally overseeing the repair and enhancement of a child's broken toy. The woodworker Alexander found, a master craftsman who usually worked on antique furniture, was bemused by the request, but moved by the story. Together, they not only repaired Mr. Horse, but strengthened every joint, smoothed every rough edge, and added small details: a carefully carved mane, delicate hooves, a flowing tail. "This is the most important work I've done in years," the craftsman said as he finished. "That little girl will treasure this forever." 3 days later, Alexander waited until Sophie arrived with Elena. He'd arranged his schedule to be home, something he rarely did during the day. "Sophie, Mr. Horse is back from the doctor," Alexander announced. Sophie's face lit up with joy as Alexander presented the restored toy. But her reaction wasn't what he expected. She looked at the beautiful, perfectly crafted horse, then at Alexander, and burst into tears. "What's wrong?" Alexander asked, alarmed. "Did we do something wrong?" "He's too pretty now," Sophie sobbed. "He doesn't look like Mommy made him anymore. I wanted him to look like Mommy's toy, not like a store toy." Alexander's heart sank. In his effort to help, he'd erased the very thing that made the toy special: its imperfect, handmade quality that connected Sophie to her mother. "I'm so sorry, Sophie. I was trying to help, but I didn't understand what made Mr. Horse special." Lena knelt beside her daughter. "Sweetheart, Mr. Thornton was very kind to fix your toy. We should be grateful." But Alexander was already calling the craftsman back. "I need you to come to my penthouse now, and bring your tools. We made a mistake." For the next 2 hours, Alexander, the craftsman, Elena, and Sophie worked together. The craftsman carefully restored the slight asymmetry of the original design, The rougher texture Elena's hands had created, the imperfect charm that made it obviously homemade. But they kept the structural improvements that would prevent future breaks. There, the craftsman said finally. Now, he looks like your mother made him, but he'll last forever. Sophie hugged Mr. Horse, then impulsively hugged Alexander's leg. Thank you for understanding. You're nice. After Sophie and Elena returned to the kitchen, Alexander sat in his office staring at the quarterly reports he'd been reviewing. The numbers seemed meaningless now compared to the lesson he just learned about what actually mattered. He called Elena into his office. How much do you make working for me? He asked. Elena looked nervous. Sir, if this is about today, I promise it won't happen again. I'll make other arrangements, that's not what I'm asking. How much do I pay you? Elena named a figure that made Alexander realize with shame that he spent more on his monthly car service than he paid the woman who maintained his entire home and life. And your other job? I clean offices at night. Between both jobs, I managed to pay rent and provide for Sophie, barely. Alexander opened his laptop. I'm tripling your salary, effective immediately. I'm also hiring you as my full-time household manager, which means no more second job. And I'm setting up a trust fund for Sophie's education. Elena stared at him. Sir, I don't understand. Why? Because today, your daughter taught me something no business school ever did. That value isn't about perfection or polish. It's about meaning and connection. I tried to fix her toy by making it perfect, but in doing so, I destroyed what made it special that you made it with your own hands, despite being exhausted and overwhelmed. He looked at Elena directly. You're an exceptional mother, doing everything you can with limited resources. I'm a wealthy man who's been so focused on profit that I forgot about people. Your daughter's broken toy reminded me what actually matters. Mr. Thornton, this is too much. It's not nearly enough. But it's a start. Over the next months, Alexander's penthouse changed. Sophie's presence brought life and laughter to spaces that had been sterile and silent. Alexander found himself leaving work early to play with Sophie, teaching her to read, listening to her endless questions about how everything worked. Elena, relieved of her crushing work schedule, began creating again toys, drawings, small crafts for Sophie. Alexander watched her transform from exhausted survival mode to someone who could breathe and dream. 6 months after the broken toy incident, Alexander invited Elena to dinner at his penthouse, just the two of them, with Sophie at a sleepover with a friend. Elena, I need to tell you something. These past months, having you and Sophie here, it's changed everything for me. This penthouse was always just a place I slept between work sessions. Now, it's a home. And that's because of you both, Mr. Thornton. Alexander, please, I think we're past formalities. He took her hand. I know this might seem inappropriate. I'm your employer. I'm wealthy, and you're not. There's a power imbalance. But I want you to know that over these months, I've fallen in love with you and Sophie. Not because I'm trying to rescue you, or because I need someone to manage my home, but because you're the strongest, kindest, most remarkable woman I've ever met. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Alexander, I don't know what to say. I've tried so hard not to feel this way. You're my employer, and I kept telling myself these feelings were just gratitude for your kindness. But they're not. I love you too. Sophie adores you. But I'm terrified. What if this doesn't work? What if I lose my job and my home, and Sophie loses someone she's come to see as a father figure? Then I'll make sure you and Sophie are secure regardless. I'll put it in writing. But Elena, I don't think it won't work. I think Sophie's broken toy led me to exactly where I needed to be with the people who matter most. A year later, Alexander and Elena were married in a small ceremony in the penthouse, with Sophie as flower girl. At the reception, Sophie, now 5, made a toast with her juice cup. Mr. Alexander fixed my toy horse when he was broken. Then Mr. Alexander fixed Mommy when she was tired. Then Mommy fixed Mr. Alexander when he was lonely. And now, we're all fixed together. In his own toast, Alexander told the story of the broken toy. I heard a child crying over something I thought was trivial, a broken wooden horse. I tried to help by making it perfect. but in doing so, I almost destroyed what made it special. Sophie taught me that day that value isn't about perfection. It's about meaning, that the imperfect things we create with our own hands, out of love and limited resources, are often worth more than anything money can buy. He looked at his wife and daughter. Elena made that toy with tired hands and a loving heart. She made Sophie into a remarkable child, despite overwhelming obstacles. She helped me understand that all my wealth was worthless because I'd forgotten to invest in what actually matters: connection, compassion, presence. Thank you for letting a broken toy teach me what it means to be truly rich.